We have Gary B. Smith, Tracy Burns, Jonas Max Ferris, John Layfield, along with David Mercer. Welcome to everybody. Okay, John, the government raising its debt, average Americans cutting their debt. What's going on here?
What alternative universe does the president think that America lives in? Look, if you have a credit card debt and you have $10,000 limit, you've reached your $10,000, and you turn to your credit card company and say, listen, I'm borrowing money every month from my neighbor to pay off my credit card debt. Could you raise it to $20,000 because raising my credit card limit does not increase my debt? It's preposterous, the argument that the president is making here. Look, this isn't just President Obama. Debt has just skyrocketed in his administration. But since 2000, the Republicans and Democrats both, $5.6 trillion in debt in 2000, almost 3 times that right now. We are the richest nation in the world, and we are on a path that is unsustainable by this Congress and this administration that we have. Somewhere they've got to rein in their spending, just like we Americans have to do in our personal spending.
But Jonas, the government has a different role than average Americans do. Does that make a difference?
Definitely. First of all, what we just heard is actually sort of interesting, because when they raise your credit limit on your credit card, your FICO score, your credit score goes up. Same with the government. If they were to raise the limit, our sovereign debt rating actually would probably go up. But the reason why the government shouldn't do what people do, yes, people have been paying down debt because we were in a recession. They were scared, less income, they don't want to borrow money to buy a car, et cetera, et cetera. The government needs to do the opposite. In a recession, they should be like, I'm going to get crazy and spend more money that I don't have and borrow it. And then when people do the opposite and get enthusiastic about the economy, start borrowing money, buying bigger houses, that's when the government should do the opposite and start to shrink their deficit and to be a counterbalance to the natural cyclicality in the economy. Unfortunately, I don't see that path triggering very soon.
Oh, okay, Gary B., you agree with Jonas's economics here?
I think Jonas's last name is Keynes because he's right out of the Keynesian playbook there. So Jonas basically subscribes to the theory that all this government spending is going to help the economy. It's not. It's inefficient spending, as we've talked about ad nauseum. What the debt limit does do, and Obama has it right, it doesn't inhibit the spending. What it does is pays for the bills already signed. But the problem is, and both parts of Congress are responsible. They pass, let's just call it $1 trillion in new spending bills, and the debt limit is only $900 billion. So they say, well, we can't pay for the trillion. We need to raise the debt limit. And it's that assumption that the debt limit is going to keep being raised that contributes to the spending. So what we need to do is at some point clamp down on this whole debt limit, stop increasing it, and have some sort of balanced budget.
But Tracy, wouldn't it be nice if you wanted to spend more money, you just took a vote of your family and said, okay, let's raise our debt that we're going to take on?
Yes, and actually still be able to sleep at night. Because I can't when I have credit card debt. It drives me crazy. You know, Brenda, I found that whole thing with the president so condescending. You silly average American, you seem to think that raising the debt ceiling increase. You're silly, you're dumb, you don't know anything, I know better. That's not true, right? And I don't care what anyone says. Increasing government spending, you want to create your shovel-ready jobs, which are still non-existent? It is not going to help us at the end of the day. Why don't we start looking at the problem here? Obamacare is the problem because no one's hiring, so therefore we're not bringing revenue. No one's got money out there. It's so simple, and yet they're so stupid down there sometimes that I just don't get it.
Well, David, the debt is now 3/4 of the GDP, which is basically the economy. In 25 years, it's supposed to be 100% of the economy. That's not heading in the right way.
And that's why we ran in June and July, we ran surpluses, actually. We're bringing down our deficits, and as a percentage of GDP, spending is at almost a record low of 15% of GDP. So we've been bringing spending down. But to John's point, with regard to the credit card analogy, one thing a family knows is that if they don't pay the credit card bill that they use to spend money, then they lose that credit card, or they get a lower credit rating. And Congress authorized the spending that's going on, and we need for the full faith and credit of the United States to remain intact and to keep borrowing costs low. We need to pay our bills, and the raising of the debt ceiling does not add a dime to deficit spending. It only authorizes what has already been signed into law by bills in Congress appropriating those funds.
Well, but if we have raised the debt ceiling 100 times, as the president says. Isn't that just proof, John, that we are spending more money?
Good Lord, yes. Yes, you're giving these guys license. To say they spend like drunk sailors, as John McCain says, is an insult to drunk sailors. These guys have gone absolutely crazy. I am not for a government shutdown. I am not for default on the debt. That will not happen most likely because we're going to have...
hopefully you're for paying for the bills.
Okay,
we're going to be able to pay those bills. Look, the thing is, if you're saying it's not going to add to the debt, then why don't you just stay within the budget right now? We need a congressional amendment for a balanced budget amendment. Nobody is for that because no politician says we're going to balance the budget because they know if they are the ones that create the austerity, they're the ones that get fired.
Then you have to do that before you get to a debt ceiling.
But we are like a hamster on a wheel here. We're just going to keep going and going because when the Fed decides it's not going to taper and leave everything really, really low and cheap interest rates, money is still dirt cheap. Our interest payments on all this debt are actually staying kind of low. When the reality hits and the interest rates start to go up and those interest payments start to rocket, then what happens to us? We're all living in la-la land right now.
And those interest rates will go up if we don't meet the debt ceiling and get it passed. The interest rates will go up.
Look at the 10-year Treasury.
Okay, Gary B.
This will help it along.
Is all this spending going to hurt the economy?
Is all the government spending going to hurt the economy? No, absolutely not. You know, David was trying to pull on our heartstrings there. I'm surprised he didn't bring up teachers or firemen or, you know, the poor
not
and disabled.
Heartstrings, just the facts, Gary B.
Well, here are the facts.
Because the debt ceiling doesn't add a nickel to
David,
the debt.
hold on. Let Gary go.
The arguments rang the same as when we were talking about the sequester. Oh, my gosh, it's going to be catastrophic. We can't live without the government spending. Meanwhile, here's the effect of the sequester. Free people forget about that. As far as not paying the debt limit, what would happen if we didn't pass it? The government, the Treasury Department would have to prioritize the debt and interest payments. They could do that. They could make that a top priority. And then guess what? They'd have to live within their means for the other parts of the spending.
And when we did that last time, the stock market went
just
down by
do
17%, Gary. But last time we did that, the stock market within 3 weeks went down 17%. Consumer confidence went down.
Are you saying the government's responsibility is the stock market?
Yeah. Well, in any case,
no, I'm saying that you give confidence
I don't care about
to decision making. There's confidence in decision making among
guys, you're talking over one another. Okay, our viewers just hate that. Jonas, go ahead.
The problem with this debt limit is it doesn't just address new spending. If you triggered the debt ceiling and all of a sudden you could not pass a new bill that was new spending, it would be a useful tool in government. But unfortunately, it applies to all spending. So arbitrarily now you can't make payments theoretically for things we already have to pay for: Medicare, it's defense spending, contracts you've already done. Right. You can't, if you've already committed to something, that has to be dealt with. If you want to stop new spending with a debt ceiling, then it should only address no new spending until this limit's raised, or we'd cut something else to counter it. But that would make sense. The way it is now, that's why it's been raised almost 100 times. It has to be, because it doesn't make any sense to have one.
But Jonas, you make the perfect point. Then why don't we ever have a logical conversation about entitlements out there? Why? When we just keep spending